Good morning, Miles. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Errol. How are you doing?
Man, I got to tell you, I love this podcast. I listen on iHeartRadio, and I've only had one episode, and I was kind of upset that I didn't have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I guess I'm such a binge watcher that I want everything like right now. But I love how you are presenting this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much. I mean, episode 2 is out and they'll come out every week. But I totally get the binge factor because even as I was working on the show, I'm like, well, are we going to figure this out? Do we know who this guy is? Can we find this guy? And yeah, The Good Thief is, for people who don't know, it's about this guy, Vassilis Palaikostas, who's, considered Greece's modern day Robin Hood. Yeah. And he had this 20-year, career where he put together some of the most out of this world bank heists and prison escapes. I mean, this guy, he basically escaped, Greece's Alcatraz twice. And he used a helicopter both times.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole podcast, it like we call it kind of like a popcorn podcast because it really feels like a movie. Like I think I always say this to people who have maybe aren't really listening to podcasts or have only heard a few. Try this one because it moves like a movie and the time flies by and it's a really interesting story.
You bring up a very interesting point about those that are just discovering podcasts because I know that for many people it usually starts off with listening to some morning show's best of tape and then all of a sudden you start going, okay, wait a second, there's got to be more to this than just this. And when you do land on something like Outlaws, The Good Thief, all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, this is better than books on tape because this is the actual thing.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, I think with books on tape, it's pretty normal. Like you're getting read a book, but with this, there's great sound design, great score. It feels like you're watching a Guy Ritchie movie, or kind of bank heist movie, and it moves really, really fast. And yeah, like I said, it's probably one of the most action-packed podcasts I've listened to. And making podcasts, I've heard a lot of podcasts. So I say that with the most seriousness.
One of the things that you have on this is that you have a team, and and each team has a mission, and each team is bringing something back to that studio.
Yeah. So we had this great partnership with the Greek Podcast Project and this group of investigative journalists in Greece who obviously, when we partnered with them, knew about the story.
Yep.
But also had a lot of questions. We all know about this guy, but it's so many of these stories about him, like how he would rob banks and then, pay for someone's education, in this mountain area that he was from, or take a tractor for a bank heist and then bring it back with a full bed of hay and cash on the seat. We're always trying to figure out, is this real? Because a lot of those stories are secondhand. It's a cousin's friend's cousin told us about this or it happened to them. So these, our team in Greece, they went everywhere from the mountains to far-flung islands in search of this guy and really trying to nail down, who exactly he is, because no one has seen him in about 14 years.
Yeah.
But we know he's out there.
What's really interesting that I love about the story, and I think what kept drawing me to the story even closer and closer, was the fact that he and his group never injured anyone. That was so important to them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just that's kind of where we kind of wrestle with this idea of a good thief. What is a good thief, because, their philosophy as bank robbers, they kind of saw themselves as gentlemen robbers in a way. And whenever even if they, they get into kidnapping at a certain point, and even then they're giving their, the people that they're abducting, making sure they're comfortable. Here's a newspaper, here's some food. And these guys would always come back after being kidnapped from them, they're really nice guys.
Yeah.
They're really polite. I kind of see where they're coming from. And, living, I think, in a world today, times are really tough. And I think a lot of people, they look around and it just seems like things are getting harder and we're not making as much money as we could. And we see people making a lot more money at the top. And you begin to wonder, it's well, where's our piece? And I think that was a huge thing about Vassilis Palaikostas is he saw all this corruption in Greece. And he saw all the people he grew up with just suffering on that end. And that was, I guess, his attempt to sort of right the scales.
Well, I mean, if he's been missing for 14 years, it's almost like why isn't he taking care of this generation, the 14 years and stuff? And you really do point that picture out. We don't even know if he's alive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, our team, and then, this it gets very interesting in the later episodes. So I'm not going to spoil anything. But, we find out that, someone spotted him in a cafe in this one town. another person spotted him driving on this mountain road, and like they see him all the time. Other people say, like he might be in poor health. So we have to follow all those leads. And, eventually we kind of get to a point where we begin to see what the real truth is.
What's really interesting about this is that they never saw it as stealing money. They were just taking things from people who can afford to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, again, why they, as, quote unquote, moral criminals, really did their research. They're looking around and they say, even if, who has a lot of money? Okay, are they in good health? Because we also don't want to shock them if we rob them and cause some kind of significant health event for them. So they would cross like older people off the list and find people that were like in better health. So all of these things were being considered, because at the end, I think the way they look at it is, with all the corruption going on, everyday people are being stolen from. So what difference does it make if a few million is lost from someone who tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars?
The inner circle here is basically unbreakable and unstoppable. What glued them together to be so faithful to each other?
I think these guys, right, they come from this, they all have a really similar background. They all come from this mountainous region in Greece, where it's really underdeveloped. The Greek state has kind of forgot that these people live there, and life is really, really hard growing up there. And all these kids grow up, by campfires and, not having all of the modern amenities a lot of people did at the time that Vassilis was a child. And I think they have this really shared worldview and perspective, and also their perspective of how the Greek government was treating them. They were also sort of unified in this way of saying they don't care about us and our people, but we care about our people. So what can we do? Because at the end of the day, they do like a little bit of robbery. Let's not get that mixed up. Like, that is something they do enjoy. But at the same time, they said it can't be for nothing. We want to be able to help the people that are around us. So that's kind of like, I think, what really makes, that quote, thick as thieves, really, really apparent here.
Can you imagine being a fly on the wall while they're planning for something? Because, I mean, it was so planned out. In the very first episode, when they go in there to rob, I mean, it is down to the seconds. Every second counts.
Yeah. And I think, for them, they're also thrill seekers too. And you can hear as you listen to more as the series goes on, and we find out a little bit more about how they're planned. At times, they kind of like a little bit of a more dangerous heist, because it feels like they pulled something off a little bit more, commendable or memorable. So, yeah, I think all the planning, I think that all contributes to the fact that they were basically the most successful bank robbers in Greek history, and also the amount of times they busted out of prison.
Why are we just finding out about this guy or basically this group here in the United States?
I think it's like one of those things where every country has these kinds of stories. Like we have them here in the U.S., they have them. Pretty much every culture has this story about people who take from the rich or corrupt and want to redistribute that wealth to the people around them for their own betterment. And with this one, this was definitely something that if you were in Greece, you knew about, because it was all over the news and everybody was talking about this. And even friends of mine who are Greek American, I asked them, like, have you heard of this Vassilis Palaikostas? And like, oh yeah, that was like 20 years ago. So they've definitely heard it. And I think, like anything, it just takes a while sometimes for people to say, this is actually a really interesting story. And it sort of takes a place like iHeart to say, you know what, that is an interesting story. Let's pursue that. Let's find out about this. Let's put this in front of people. And yeah, here we are with the help of, all of our team in Greece and the folks here at iHeart and Kaleidoscope.
Where along the line did you decide that we're going to break this up into chapters? Because I think that is such a perfect planning method, because you give me an opportunity to take another breath.
I think that's the thing about podcasts, that the real challenge is, because we don't have video and VFX and things like that. You really have to think about how it sounds and how people take the information in, and really work with that in a way that feels natural. So by the end of it, they don't miss a thing, and they feel totally checked in with everything that's happening. You
brought up video, because I won't do video. And I think that's because I'm a radio guy. And I just think that video takes away from the imagination. Are you believing that same thing?
Yeah. I mean, as a podcaster,
yeah.
I used to work in, I used to work in physical production, doing video and things like that. And podcasting audio, it's just way more liberating. Excuse me. I think that just, gives you way more freedom. And the human voice, honestly, I think is the most powerful thing, the most powerful communication tool more than anything visual. And because of that, yeah, I don't think video is necessarily a needed part.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to your story sharing, because you've got a brilliant way of bringing us into the story, where did you learn that from? Because, I mean, if you haven't been trained by radio program directors or voiceover actors, where did it come from, this skill?
I honestly, I don't know. I've had I've had all kinds of jobs throughout my life. I was a lobbyist working in politics for a number of years. Got over that, and I realized I wanted to be a comedian, so I did a lot of improv and writing and things like that. And I don't know, I think maybe it's just being an only child, just wanting to talk all the time. So from there, I learned how to hone that and say, well, if you're going to talk all the time, maybe talk in a way that's as interesting as possible.
Oh yeah, because it's such a natural thing where people want to talk like this all the time. They want to talk like Randy Radio.
Yeah, of course. And I can definitely put that host up voice on. The first couple reads of the show didn't quite go the way we thought. So they said, hey, let's dial it back. Let's make it feel like you're just telling your friend, at a bar or a party about this wild thing you heard. And that's sort of, that's kind of the direction we take.
Only because I've been a podcaster since 2012. I know that the Outlaws, the Good Thief, can't be your only one. There had to have been many attempts before this.
Oh, yeah. I have a few other podcasts. I do have a daily news, politics, culture podcast, Daily Zeitgeist, which is really fun. And then I have a show with the NBA called Miles and Jack Got Mad Boosties. Very long title, but it's just like a fun, just like fan conversational sports podcast, just talking about the NBA. So, yeah, it's funny now that like I'm kind of hitting the full spectrum of topics you can do, from like news to true crime, sports. Just need like a reality show recap one.
Well, it reminds me, because John Lennon has a new movie out right now with May Pang, and he really, they put focus in on how Whatever Gets You Through the Night, the song, and it came to him because he was watching a late night preacher. You and I, as podcasters, things hit us when we least expect it, and we run with it. How do you deal with that?
You just like an idea that hits you or something?
Oh my God, yes. Tell me that you are not because I listen to this podcast. You watch the world. I can hear it in the way that you share your words.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes back to this thing of just always being a really curious person. And I always indulge my curiosity. Like if there's something I'm interested in or I like, I go down a rabbit hole pretty quickly. So I think, the way I deal with it is like when I get that itch, I just have to scratch it. And yeah, sometimes you find out things that are really cool, sometimes not very interesting things, sometimes things that bum you out, but it's always worth that pursuit of, whatever you're interested in or whatever you're curious about.
Is that how you landed on this podcast, Outlaws, the Good Thief?
Yeah, I mean, this was a partnership between iHeart and Kaleidoscope Media, and the friends of mine at Kaleidoscope were just sort of like, hey, like, I know we've been talking to you about this idea, but like, I think we're going to make the show. Do you want to do it? I almost bit their hand off because I was like, yes, absolutely. This is the most interesting thing to me. And for me personally, like I said, I just think, it's in a time right now where, again, I feel like people aren't doing as well as they could be. It's nice to just sort of see that there is this like sort of feeling, or at least ethos within people of like, you know what, things are bad. Things can be better. Now, I don't know if this is the best way to solve those things, but at the very least, it makes for a really entertaining, fun ride. Yeah,
speaking of that, because that's how I listened to it, was riding in the car. And it helped me say, okay, well, if these guys who are bad, but they're not really bad, are doing good things for people, what am I doing in my own world where I could be doing some good as well?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's really admirable. I mean, these guys are sort of almost, they're part bank robbers, part philosophers in that way, where it's like, we're not going to steal just to steal things. Like if we do it, we'll enrich ourselves, but we want to also help people around us. And if we're going to do it, we want to do it in the most ethical way. I think that's just a really, just a neat part of it. And yeah, like you said, it kind of does make you confront what you do in your own day to day. And you're like, how can I give back to my community? I don't need to rob a bank and do that, but maybe I can volunteer. Maybe I can just see what groups are out there in my community and help out and just connect with each other. because I think that's a definite good step to giving back for sure.
Bruce Lee always said, don't give away your knowledge because it'll become a weapon against you. Okay, now we have The Apprentice inside this podcast. Oh my God, dude. I mean, when I first heard about this, I thought, we got trouble going on here.
Yeah. And again, like that apprentice, who starts off as just kind of like this kid, ends up becoming Greece's biggest bank robber.
Yeah.
And he's a guy who also, when he had a bit of curiosity, he went after it. And whether that was finding out who the most corrupt officials were in Greece, or just learning the layout of a prison so he can escape twice, he does it. And I think, that like laser focus pays off, definitely for us as we listen to all these different hijinks they pull off.
Were you in the production room when you put together the scene where he escapes the prison by way of helicopter? Because the timing, well, that's got to be the comedian coming out in you, because the pause, the timing, everything had a payoff on that scene.
Yeah, I think that was, again, I what's funny is I definitely knew how the episodes were going to move, but for me as a creator, I said, I want to hear it when you guys have fully cut it, because my part is to voice it and help connect all the other pieces of the podcast. But I really I want to feel like the audience. I want to see it for the first time. I don't want to spoil it for myself. So I wasn't there for that specific assembly, but you could easily see from the script, you're like, oh, this is going to sound so good. But I was completely blown away with the final product. I mean, the sound design, you're just put in the place, and it's kind of what we call popcorn podcasting. It feels a movie. It's not a dry informational show. It moves. It feels like a Guy Ritchie movie, like you're watching Snatch or something like that, but in a podcast, which is a really, really rare commodity, I think, right now.
Where I'm scared right now with podcasting is that, first of all, I fully support the actors and the writer's strike right now. I'm so afraid that it's going to stretch off into the podcasting world, because that's writing and that's performing as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge, that is a huge push within podcasting right now too, is to try and figure out, well, what is, as creators, what is our place in this, and what kind of agreements should we be seeing, or what is equitable in terms of the work that's put in. And you are seeing podcasters begin to unionize, but not quite at that level that they are at SAG-AFTRA or the WGA. But yeah, I think anything, we're just living in an era where people are really, really conscious of the work they do and what they get back from it. And I think that even extends to kind of the reality for Greek people that the Palaikostas brothers and this other guy, Kostas Samaras, that they worked with, were sort of viewing too, and just kind of wondering, can things be a little bit more balanced here?
Do you really want to find him? I mean, because inside my heart, I'm going, please don't find him. I want it to be like the Sasquatch.
Exactly right. Yeah, you want to see a weird grainy 8mm film of him walking around the Acropolis or something. Is that him? Or is that a guy in a suit? But yeah, we chased down, and I'm not joking, nearly every single lead that we got from people saying they saw him here, or my friend saw him there. We really go and try and find, and I'm not going to spoil anything, and I won't say whether or not I feel good or bad about finding him or not finding him, but it does make for a really satisfying ending. And I think what's at the end, what is true, and the thing you do realize is the myth is definitely the thing that powers everything. And sometimes the man isn't as important when you really zoom out, because his effect on the people of Greece, I mean, he was like a folk hero to these people. Yeah. And even though, but he was robbing banks, and it doesn't matter. He gave back. That was his whole thing. And he didn't hurt people. So what's the point? They're saying the Greek government is stealing from us every day. So we cheer him on. You do so well with the podcast. Could you ever turn it into a book, or is your voice that one outlet where you've got control of it? I mean, I think right now, I think the production team would love to see this maybe have an evolution into something that you could see visually. Yeah. I think that would be great. At that point, I would definitely just let that production be whatever it is, because I think that's its complete own iteration of this story. But we're really proud of this one, of the podcast. And yeah, it like I said, for anyone who, even if you've not listened to podcasts much, I say, please take a chance with this, because I promise you, it's almost like you're watching TV, but you're just not looking at the screen. Oh,
you're so right about that. And I told you from the very beginning, I said, I'm addicted to this, and I want every episode right now, because I'm a spoiled child.
No, I know. Eventually, we'll get to that binge model, but we got to chum the waters a little bit and keep you coming back every week. But I promise it's going to be a great payoff.
Excellent, Miles. Come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, thank you so much, Arrow.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Yeah, you too.